but I, but you got it made, and it's an
Yeah.
incredible picture. Do you have any? I mean, you know, now that you've been a movie maker for since the aughts, do you have any? I don't know if it's even advice to people, but about what ideas move and what ideas don't move. Have you learned anything, or is it just a total crapshoot?
It's a crapshoot, I think. I mean, you learn about yourself by doing this and I may have taken all the wrong lessons. But I think for sure things only happen if you commit absolutely. If it only happens if you jump off the cliff and say,
Yeah, yeah.
I'm going to survive this somehow. And you might be wrong, by the way. That's another lesson that's the thing I think sometimes, and maybe in American culture too, we so value the risk takers that I think people sometimes lose sight of, like the fact that sometimes jumping off a cliff just means you're fucking splattered on a lot of rocks.
Like how many bodies are in the valley?
Yeah, there's a lot of bodies in that valley for sure. And I've been the body in that valley many times. Um, but yeah, nothing's going to happen unless you're completely committed to it happening. And one of the things I've never been good at, I mean, what you find in the movie industry is that most people who work professionally, have always got 20 projects going at once because they
Right.
know that at least 19 of them are going to crash and burn. It's hard for me to think that way. It's hard for me to work that way. I don't quite have the bandwidth to really believe in 20 things at once. But that's one way to do it. I think the potential risk of that is that if that 20th one goes and you don't really care that much about it because it's one of 20 projects, then then there you are working on something that was kind of a gamble that maybe you shouldn't have taken.
Right.
No, but I don't have any advice. I mean, I think belief and commitment they're your best friends and your worst enemy. It's the thing that can also kill you and make you vulnerable.
Right.
But it's also the only thing that gets it done.
So we're going to be non-linear here because I don't want to.
So we already are. Yeah.
Oh yeah, there we go. So in doing my research, you were born in Massachusetts,
Mm-hmm.
and is that where you grew up?
Yeah.
So could you just tell us a little bit about growing up and how you developed an interest in movies, or was that not even an interest until later?
Oh no, that was the earliest interest for sure. I don't really, I think by the time I was 5 years old, I was already in love with the movies, and that's so I don't really remember a time when I wasn't movie crazy, and I worry about that sometimes. Every once in a while, as I trudge through life, I think, why am I still serving the dream life of a 5-year-old? But it was that 5-year-old who just fell in love with this stuff, and of course, I don't think I knew what it meant to make movies then, but I learned sort of. And so always a movie crazy kid, always demanding that my parents take me to whatever was out. And as I got older, my tastes got a little more diverse. I went to I studied film as an undergrad and made films in undergrad. I never went to graduate school, but I felt like my first movie, Funny Haha, I think I was 24 when we shot that, and that was my film school, my grad school. And somehow, that there was just enough traction from that, or that just got just enough love that I'm still trying to live off that momentum.
Well, so just backing you, I'm just going to say this. You probably don't want me to say this. In my interactions with you, I found you to be incredibly humble, and I'm very a little
a lot to be humble about, Craig.
well, but you've been just very approachable and very humble. I can't thank you enough for that. And you didn't say it, so I'm going to say you went to Harvard, and I studied, or I read that your mentor was Chantal Akerman, and I was just wondering if you had any. I mean, what a mentor to have, and
Sure.
What was that like? What did you learn from Miss Akerman? What was that experience like? Because she's such a singular figure in cinema.
Sure. Yeah, no, I had extraordinary. I mean, one of the nice things about Harvard is you have access to extraordinary people, and extraordinary people blow through there. So I believe she only taught there for 1 year. She was I happened to be there, and she happened to be my thesis advisor that year. I also, Dusan Makaveyev was another teacher of mine, and yeah, just incredible place to be. Um, Chantal, I always feel like, when I talk about her and when I talk about what she's meant in my life, it's not so much about direct
Right.
aesthetic influence or me, or her saying you should set up the shot this way or any of that. Although, of course, I love her films, and I'm sure have taken things from them, as everybody has. But it was just her. I've never known before or since an artist as committed as she was. She was, I think, the most serious artist I've ever known, but also very funny. And that was maybe a great lesson to me, or maybe I'm just projecting this onto her. But I think I kind of took from her, you can't really be serious unless you're funny, and vice versa. So more than anything, it was just kind of this being a kid from the American suburbs, and in some ways, pretty sheltered.
Boston suburbs?
Yeah, we moved around a bit when I was a kid, and so I lived in Virginia for a bit and Florida for a bit, but mostly I grew up in Newton, Massachusetts, home of the Fig Newton. And so, just to like see a real European artist, as the kind that I'd read so much about, was extraordinary. And she was an extraordinary, generous person, obviously a very complex person, very complex psychology, but it's hard for me to quantify. I loved her, certainly.
I went to film school, and I had a screenwriting mentor, Marty Martin, who was the co-screenwriter on like Mean Streets and Raging Bull and stuff. And he it's like you said, he said one of the most important things to me ever. One of the first things he said, he was Iranian, I believe. And he just told me, and I can't really do his accent, but he was just like, Craig, you look at your navel too much. And I remember being like, it was like, you're right. And he was like, you don't need to write so much, like you look at your navel. And I remember that was like one of the most, and then he just taught me to kind of look outside and think outside. But it's funny the influence those people have on you.
Oh yeah.
Because of their experience, because they're like 20 or 30 years ahead of you. And how they kind of knock you a little bit. And if you're listening, it can be helpful.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, yeah, Chantal was, light years ahead of me, but just to be in that presence and to realize that it was possible to do what she did, not that I was ever going to make films like hers or accomplish at the level she accomplished, but that it just opens your mind so much to see that in action. I mean, as far as advice, the two pieces of advice I remember her giving me, one was that I should stop dressing like a 15-year-old, which I never did. My wife gives me the same advice today, and I haven't taken it yet. And I think and she had also told me at one point, she said, she's like, you are a funny guy. Stop being pretentious and just be funny. I never really did that either. But someday I'll dress better and stop being pretentious.
So going back to Mutual Appreciation, because these are the two movies we're going to show. I don't even know how to formulate the question, because I saw it at exactly the right age. How old were you when you made it?
Oh, Mutual?
Yeah.
It was 26 when he shot that.
And I think I saw it because you and I are the same age. I think I saw it. It came out a few years later. So maybe I was 27 or 28. And I was living, not that, but that version of everyone single, hanging out at apartment. And, the thing that's so beautiful about the movie, one of the beautiful things is that it's actually very moral and ethical in a way as well. Where I think a lot of movies about, I like this person, but they're married or this or that, it's sort of a different thing. And I'm wondering, did you know that's where it was going to go? Was the script done? Did you change it at all? Because the turns in it are very surprising in a wonderful way. You don't really expect it to be and move the way it moves, which is, I think, one of its huge strengths.
Thank you. Yeah, I hope so. The structure certainly was all there on the page. We didn't monkey around much structure wise, and even within the scenes, I think one of the questions I used to get a lot, especially with those first couple of films, was how much of this is ad libbed or how much is improv, and I could never really answer it properly because I felt, first of all, there's never a formula, there's never a percentage breakdown, but also in a way, I remember feeling like, well, it's acting is improvisation to some degree. It's like no two takes are
Yeah, totally.
the same, or they shouldn't be. And so there was always an aspect, and I was always open to, of course, if somebody in a moment wanted to phrase something differently, I tried to be very unprecious about that, unless there was something I really needed, and then I could say, look, I'm sorry, but I gotta have this word. But that was rarely the case. It was usually about let's get this stuff across, and let's get it across however we can that it feels alive. That's all I cared about, especially on those movies. But the structure that was on the page was very useful. We needed that to get through. So I think maybe more than people expect, most of how things are moving is there on the page. I don't know. I mean, you've refined it all again in the edit anyway.
Right.
And so you kind of have to like kill the writer and be reborn as the writer in the edit room.
And what was it like, and I love I love your performance too. One of the things, I don't know how you feel about it, but what was it like acting? What was it like for you acting and directing in those first two pictures?
I will say I've had not much, but in the very small experiences I've had acting for other people, I found it much harder. I found it easier, at least at that time, I found it easier to act while directing because all of my anxiety was wrapped up in directing. I had so much to worry about as the director that I didn't have a lot of bandwidth left for thinking about how fat I was or how bad I was doing. Whereas when you're just an actor, you have a lot of time to think about those things. And so, yeah, I honestly don't remember that much about acting because it kind of was like just another thing I had to do to get through the day.
Huh.
Which I think was for the benefit of those performances. I do, and I like them. I'm glad I did them. I think I kind of explored my range, and it's like from here to here. I don't know that I had a whole lot else to offer as an actor, but I think the best of what I had is in those movies.
Well, you're one. I mean, you're wonderful in them. I mean, if you acted again, it would be wonderful to see you. It's because there's some, and I love all movies, and you do see some filmmakers who put themselves in their movies, and I get it. I because I love acting, but you go, I don't know that was the best decision.
Sure.
It sort of takes you out, or they're not quite. But you were never, anyway. It's just a compliment. You were always so organic and natural. You never wouldn't.
Well, there are some. I was so pleased in the Twin Peaks revival that there was so much David Lynch in it.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
I was so happy to see him stand up and do that. And I miss, I wish Spike Lee would act again. And I can't remember the last time he did it. And when Scorsese would show up, and I love it when he acts. So, I certainly, they're not to say that I'm at any of those guys' level in any way as an actor or a director, certainly not as a director, but I always liked that stuff, and I was always happy to see them.